All right, lesson 2.2, probability, part 1. All right, so probability is the chance of something happening. All right. So fair means that there's an equal chance of something happening. So most simple example when working with probability is just work with flipping a coin. What are the total possible outcomes when flipping a fair coin? There are 2 possible outcomes. All right, what are those 2 outcomes? Head or tail. All right, those are the 2 outcomes. How many of those outcomes are head? Well, there's 1. How many of those outcomes are tail? 1. All right, so the numerical probability of something happening is the desired outcome over the number of total outcomes, all right, which is what we have stated right here. All right, that's the formula for probability. So what is the probability that the outcome is a head when flipping a fair coin? Well, head is the desired outcome. So there's 1 chance of getting a head when flipping a coin. How many possible outcomes are there? Possible outcomes, there are 2. So the probability is a half. What is the probability that the outcome is a tail when flipping a fair coin? Well, the desired outcome is a tail. There's only 1 possibility, or 1 outcome. And how many total possible outcomes are there once again when flipping a coin? There's 2. So probability of getting a tail is a half. So what do the probabilities of all the individual outcomes always add up to? Well, half for flipping a head, and the probability for flipping a tail is a half. We get 2 over 2, which is equal to 1. Now, it doesn't matter what type of probability problem you're working with, whenever you add up all the individual probabilities, the end result will always be 1. Keep that in mind. All right, rolling a die. What are the total possible outcomes when rolling a fair die? Well, when rolling a die, you could get a 1, a 2, a 3, a 4, a 5, or 6. Okay, so we're just talking about 1 die. How many of those outcomes are odd? Okay, well, there's 6 possible outcomes. How many of those outcomes are odd? Well, 1, 3, and 5. There's 3 outcomes that are odd. How many of those outcomes are even? 2, 4, 6. 3 of those outcomes are even. How many of those outcomes are a 2? Well, there's 1, 2. What is the probability that the outcome is a 5? Now they said probability. Okay, so how many 5s are there? There's 1 5 out of how many possible outcomes? How many total outcomes? There's 6. So probability is 1/6. What is the probability that the outcome is even? All right, there are 1, 2, 3 evens out of how many possible outcomes? 6. And you can always reduce the fraction, so that gives us 1/2. And what do the probabilities of all the individual outcomes always add up to? All the individual outcomes. What's the probability of getting a 1? 1/6. What's the probability of getting a 2? 1/6. What's the probability of getting a 3? 1/6. What's the probability of getting a 4? 1/6. And a 5? 1/6. And a 6? 1/6. So we end up with 6 over 6, which is equal to 1. All right, whenever you add up all the individual outcomes, the result is always 1. All right, example 1. What is the probability of getting a tail when flipping a fair coin? All right, how many tails can you get when flipping 1 coin? There's 1 possible outcome. Out of how many total outcomes? 2. Done. What is the probability of getting a 4 when rolling a fair die? Well, how many 4s are there on a fair die? There's 1. How many possible outcomes are there? There's 6 possible outcomes. So 1/6. What is the probability of rolling a 1, 2, 5, or 6 for a fair die? So how many outcomes do we have here? We have 4 possible outcomes. out of how many total outcomes for a fair die? 6. We can reduce that fraction to 2/3. Right? And what is the probability of rolling less than 3 for a fair die? All right, less than 3. Less than 3 means what? That we would be rolling either a 1 or a 2. That's what less than 3 would be. So how many outcomes is this? That's 2 outcomes out of a total of how many? 6. We can simplify this fraction, and we get 1/3. Done. Example 2. There are 5 red marbles, 4 blue marbles, and 7 green marbles in a bag. What is the probability of randomly picking a red marble? Okay, there are 5 red marbles in the bag, so that's our desired outcome. There's 5 possible outcomes that we'll pick a red. Now, how many total outcomes are there? Well, it's 5 plus 4 plus 7, which is 16. So 5/16 is the probability that you'll choose a red marble. And part B, a bucket contains 3 bottles of apple juice, 2 bottles of orange juice, 6 bottles of soda, and 8 bottles of water. If Kira randomly selects a bottle, what is the probability that she will select a bottle of orange juice? How many bottles of orange juice are there? There are 2 bottles. So 2 outcomes out of how many total outcomes? 3 plus 2 plus 6 plus 8. So we have 5, 11, 19. Done. All right, last 2 examples. Leonard has 4 blue, 3 black, and 5 red ties on his rack. If he randomly selects a tie, what is the probability that he will select a tie that is not red? That is not red. All right, so how many ties do we have total? We have 7. We have 12 ties total. What is the probability that he will select a tie that is not red? So how many ties are not red? We got the blue and the black. So that's a total of 7. All right, so there's our probability, 7 out of 12. Part B, the spinner shown below is fair. What is the probability that the spinner will not stop on red if you spin it 1 time? State the probability as a percentage. Will not stop on red, not stop on red. Okay, here's red. All right, how many possible outcomes are there? There are 4. And how many of them are not red? There are 1, 2, 3 that are not red. So my desired outcome is 3 out of a total of how many outcomes? 4. All right, so 3/4 is the probability. They're asking for a percentage, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 25. 75 over 100, which is 75%. Done. All right, if you have any questions about probability, please make sure to ask. Begin the assignment.